everybody, my name is Bethan and I'm a director at Honeycomb Analytics. We work to kind of combine the fields of data analytics and the kind of softer area of research, if you like. And today I'm going to be talking a little bit about artificial intelligence and whether we can depend on artificial intelligence to deliver unbiased results, and whether we can get rid of those kind of real prejudices that exist in the real world. So, to begin with then, a little bit of background. Many of us will know this face. This is Daniel Kahneman, who has done a lot of work into studying humans, into behavioural economics, and, you know, there are plenty of theories out there that tell us that humans are very emotional, biased, unpredictable things that are very difficult to analyse, basically. Whereas, on the other side of things, a lot of us will have definitely heard of the terms artificial intelligence nowadays with everything that's going on. And a lot of people do believe that artificial intelligence is completely different in that it's very algorithmic, it's very logical, it's very rational, and completely stands apart from humans in that manner. Whereas I don't necessarily believe that's completely true. So my opinion is that actually artificial intelligence is more like humans than we think. This definition here I just stole from the internet, and it says here, as you can see, that machines are programmed to think like a human and to mimic the way a person acts. So in my mind, that means that these machines are mimicking those biases, they're mimicking that irrationality, they're, you know, programmed to think in the same emotional, irrational way that humans are, therefore making them a lot more similar. So we're going to go through a few examples of where I think this kind of behaviour is particularly apparent. And the first of these that I'm going to talk about today is Amazon. So again, many of us will have heard of headlines such as these and read the articles similar to these about a recruiting tool that Amazon came up with. So the data scientists at Amazon designed a recruiting tool to help them sift through the thousands of CVs they were getting for their tech team. And it turns out that after they'd been using it for a while, they discovered that this recruiting tool, this algorithm, this artificial intelligence was completely sexist and was actually showing a negative bias against women. So, using a technique many of you will be very familiar with in terms of laddering, getting to the bottom of what's really going on here. Why is this algorithm showing that bias when, you know, there's that perception there that it should be completely rational and it should be logical and shouldn't have any of these biases? My first argument here is that the algorithm is based on very biased data. So the data that the team used to build this algorithm was the group of CVs they had received to their team. The CVs they had received to their technical team were mostly male. What does that mean? That shows us that there is a biased representation in STEM subjects, STEM being science, technology, engineering, and maths. So the people that are in those fields and in those subjects and in those jobs tend to be male rather than female. And what does that show us? That shows us that actually that bias isn't down to the artificial intelligence. It's not because of the algorithms. It's because of real prejudice that exists in the real world. And actually, there are many other examples in the real world that kind of show a similar attitude and a similar way of working. So, for example, there are people who have designed image recognition software, obviously a very useful way to use artificial intelligence. And because of the photos and because of the images that have been shown to this particular type of software, the software learned that images of women went hand in hand with images of kitchens because women were so often seen in kitchens. Again, that's obviously not true based on the world that we live in today. I, for one, can't cook anything at all. But because of the bias data and the real prejudice that exists in the world, that apparently rational, logical, unbiased algorithm actually produced quite a lot of bias. So another example from a completely different field, looking at completely different biases. This here is a list that's not full by any means. There are plenty of algorithms missing from this list. It's a list of algorithms that are used across the United States to help judges and people in power decide whether offenders are likely to reoffend and whether they should be allowed parole or be allowed to walk free or whatever it is based on their specific case. So these algorithms tend to almost always find that black offenders are much more likely to reoffend than white offenders. And again, people may or may not have different opinions about this and, reasons as to why this might be true. The problem in this sense is the false positives. So the likelihood of wrongly labeling an innocent person as a reoffender is almost twice as likely if you're black than if you're white. So obviously that is a huge racial bias coming from the outputs here. And we have to remember here, this is a huge deal. This algorithm, these decisions, they're changing lives, and we're still kind of dealing with biases of that nature. So when we're looking at this similar sort of approach in terms of laddering, what's happening here? So this algorithm is obviously based on real data, and for me, that is enough. I obviously can't go. I don't have enough time today to go into the ins and outs of the racism that may or may not exist in the system. But the real data does show real prejudice. And obviously, there's an additional problem in this particular example here with this nasty little feedback loop in the middle. So what we have is that once you take that real data, you put that into the algorithm effects change. So that means that the people in charge are letting certain people go free and are keeping certain people in prison. And it means that they then police certain neighborhoods more, and they end up catching certain offenders more than they would have based on not having the algorithm in place, which then in turn potentially adds more bias into the data that goes back into the algorithm. And you just get this horrible spiral of things just making the whole situation worse. Excuse me. Again, this is not the only example of something like this. So a brilliant lady called Safia Noble has written a book about the sexist and the racist bias that actually exists within Google and the algorithms that uses. I would definitely recommend it, but that takes into account the fact that when you used to Google black girls, most of the first 2 pages that came up there were actually pornographic, whereas if you Googled white girls, it wasn't the same. And again, you've got the same idea there in terms of if people Google certain things, then you're going to get more results that look like that, which then encourages people to click on those links which then makes them more popular. And again, you get that horrible, nasty feedback loop in the middle. So it's all well and good of kind of, you know, saying that the world's in an awful situation. What are we actually going to do about it? One idea that many people come up with is, can we think about AI, take it into consideration, but not actually rely fully on the results? Seems, you know, like a real common sense approach, but actually it turns out that typically us as humans, we're biased in terms of how we interact with and how we interpret results, knowing that it's come from artificial intelligence. So we're not even unbiased enough to be able to look at things from artificial intelligence and take them into account when we're considering bias. Obviously, that gets messy. It's not ideal. Another idea, can we just start using data that doesn't have real prejudice? Can we eliminate that prejudice? That for me is a huge question. Can we eliminate prejudice from the world? Ideally, yes. It's not something that I personally can help with. And it's going to take a long time, over many generations, to be able to do that. So again, it's not a solution for right here and right now. For me, it's about the small steps. It's about the small things that we can do. So transparency, accountability, and responsibility are three areas that I really think we can use and we can focus on to try and make this situation better in the future. And going into each of these then, so transparency. A recent study actually found that approximately 80% of algorithms, of projects using artificial intelligence, using data science, machine learning, etc., were not able to be reproduced. There's a problem at the minute that artificial intelligence and analytics is moving on and is changing so fast, and we don't have an ethical or a lawful or any kind of structure in place to almost help regulate that. And that, for example, is a reason as to why these studies couldn't be reproduced, because there weren't the efficient documents there to be able to do that. Accountability. So this quote here is from Clay Johnson, who had a major impact on Barack Obama's presidential campaigns. So, for example, and you know, that quote was taken from before the time of Brexit, before the time of Trump, and he's almost kind of predicting the future there. Should people be held more accountable for their actions where things like this are concerned? Can we just let people get away with using machine learning algorithms and just using the results and not being held accountable for the outcomes of that? And the third one that I mentioned, responsibility. So again, this is from Safia Noble, who wrote the book about Google. And she just simply said, don't give up. It's not easy to do. And I think, again, thinking about those small steps, even if you're that one person in a team looking at using these types of technologies, these types of techniques, and you're that one person who stands up and says, do we need to think about bias here? You know, you're that one person who says, is this data set biased? Should we be doing these things with the results here? Is this the outcome that we want for the real world? Just those small steps, they'll all add up and they'll all make a difference. And I'm just going to leave you with this quote here from Charles Swindoll. You know, he was talking about people here when he said, prejudice is a learned trait. You're not born prejudiced, you're taught it. And actually, my argument is that it's very much the same situation when we look at machine learning and we look at artificial intelligence. Thank you very much.